We've got a fun topic today, but I want to start, we've been talking a lot about data, a lot about technical architecture and paid media, so let's talk about something a little different. And I want to talk about real estate, which is one of my favorite topics. I'm always on Zillow, sending my husband listings. He does not love it. But this is actually a picture of my real house. It's about an hour north of here in Westchester County. And we moved in around, September 2020, height of COVID. We had just had our first child in May, and we had been living in a fourth floor walk-up in Brooklyn, where we thought we were going to stay, and then the world turned upside down with COVID, and sort of had to act really fast, move to the suburbs. We had never been homeowners before. We had never looked for a house before. And we were, under pressure. So saw a couple of houses. This was, I think, the second house we saw. And I was like, well, this is pretty. And it's a lot bigger than our apartment now. So we moved in. And it's worked for us for a good amount of years now. So you can see that's 2020 when we moved in. This topic is Data Lakehouses. We're sort of lake house adjacent. We have a lake down the street. You can see my husband and I and my son Asher at the lake. But things have changed a lot in 4 years. We had our second child last year, Penny. You can see her in the picture on the right-hand side. Asher is a lot bigger, has a lot more toys, and so we are now bursting at the seams in our house. We are using our house in very different ways than we thought we were going to be using the house, right? So we are still working from home 4 years later, which we didn't expect. My mom, who you see in that picture at Asher's birthday party at daycare, is at our house a lot, like a lot, which is great. We're thinking about maybe getting an au pair. And so our needs have changed a lot in those 4 years since we first moved in. And so now we have this decision to make. What do we do about the fact that we've sort of outgrown our original solution? And the first sort of idea we had was like, all right, like maybe we can put an addition on. Maybe we can renovate the house. Turns out the lot that we're on, the kind of house we have, it really is not easy to do, doesn't really make sense. And when we were looking for a house, we didn't have that in mind. We weren't expecting that we were going to need to put an addition on, so what we bought doesn't really allow for that. We're like, okay, so let's buy something new. Let's buy a new house that fits all these new needs that we have. So we got a real estate agent. We've been looking now for like 6 months. She hates us because we've seen a million houses and not everything, there's nothing that ticks every single box on the wish list. And so now we're at a point where we're like, all right, like maybe we just build something. Like maybe we just buy, there's actually a lot down the street from us. It's there, like it's in our neighborhood. It's cleared. We could go out and get a contractor and an architect and design a solution that fits all of our many and sort of unique needs. So what does all of this have to do with data lakehouses, data architecture? I hope you're seeing some of the parallels. Because I think a lot of the brands we work with have been on a similar journey with their CDPs. You think back to COVID, right? All of a sudden, brands were having to use their data and engage with their customers in a way that they never had before. The world was turned upside down. And so very suddenly, I think a lot of brands went out and evaluated a category and a market that they hadn't thought that much about before, saw a couple of things, saw some pretty, features, and it looked a lot better than what they had before, and they invested in a solution. But you fast forward 4 years, and those businesses have grown. They have more customers, they have more use cases, they've become more complex in many ways, more channels. You're seeing things like new technologies come online, but also the users have become more sophisticated and are asking more of the tools that they use. And so many brands are now thinking like, hey, there is no dream house on the market for us. There is no packaged solution out there that ticks all of the boxes. And let me tell you, I see every RFP we get at Amperity, And it's insane, the list of things you guys are asking for. Like, it's crazy. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of requirements, and it's like super technical stuff, super marketing stuff. You're asking for out of the box, but also custom. Like, I guarantee you there is no platform package solution in the world that ticks every single one of the boxes on these RFPs we see. And so what is everybody starting to think about? They're starting to think about, how do we build something that fits all of our needs? And that's where you see the advent of Lakehouse CDP. Because same way that there's a plot of land down the street that's starting to look really attractive for us to build a house, there's Databricks, there's Snowflake, there's these environments that are begging for brands to come and build sort of their dream house so that they don't have to sacrifice some major things on their wish lists. So, what does it mean when we say build? And I think if you were to ask different folks in this audience, what it would mean to them to build a CDP, you'd get a lot of different answers. And so I actually went and I Googled it, and I wanted to sort of just curious about what the technical definition is of the word build, and I actually love this definition. To form by ordering and uniting materials by gradual means into a composite whole. I love this definition because I think it really captures a few critical things about the act of building. The first is that it's an iterative process. It's not something that happens overnight. When you build a house, the house doesn't go up overnight. You have to take all of the different materials and incrementally unite them into a composite whole. And the other thing I love about it is the composite aspect of it. We're not saying that every single aspect of your house has to be built from scratch. You might actually go out to Home Depot and buy prefab cabinets. You don't have to build them. There are some houses where they might take trees, the raw materials, and filter them, cleanse them, cut them down, plane them, sand them, and then build cabinets. And this is the process that every material needs to go through to actually build that aggregate solution in the end that you can actually use. A lot of parallels to building a data lakehouse. And so many of you are probably familiar with the concept of medallion data architecture, and it's describing this process of uniting materials, in this case, data, by gradual means into a composite whole. So in medallion data architecture, in the data world, what that looks like is going from bronze data, meaning data that is raw, the data that's captured in your source systems. When I make a transaction, it's the transaction record that's in your POS. When I go onto your website, it's the original sort of visit that's in your clickstream system. Taking that raw data that might have a lot of mess and noise in it, and then first filtering it, cleansing it, taking out the noise, putting it into a common schema, and then finally creating gold level aggregates that users can actually go and activate on. Because you can't activate on the bronze level data. And so what's happening as you go from bronze to silver to gold in medallion data architecture is the data is increasing in quality, it's increasing in usability, and it's increasing in value. But what's really interesting is that not all materials are created equal. So it's one thing to build a cabinet. If I were to go and I am not handy at all, but I can teach myself how to do things. I can go onto YouTube and figure out how to put different planks of wood. If you gave me sort of that silver level material, I could maybe figure it out. There are other materials that are not built or not made for a layperson or somebody with sort of a typical set of tools to be able to turn from bronze to silver to gold themselves. So take water, for example. No matter how many YouTube videos I watch, I would not be able to take raw spring water from a mountaintop and get it down into a reservoir or into a well and filter out all the parasites and then build all the pipes all through my house so that there was water actually flowing out of my faucet, out of my shower. That's not something that any layperson could do, right? You need like a PhD in civil engineering. And so I would argue that customer data is basically the water of your business. There's a lot of parallels when you think about it. Your business needs data to grow and to thrive, just like all of us need water to survive. You can't go very long without it. The second, it's seemingly everywhere, right? Water literally drops from the sky, right? There's that lake down the street. Am I gonna go walk down the street with a cup and scoop up water when I'm thirsty? No, I can't consume that raw material. Why? It'll make me sick. And similar to data, a lot of the sort of potential parasites or things that would make me sick in water are actually really hard to see with the naked eye and hard to know that they're there. But if you consume them, it can be toxic. Same thing with data, right? What do we always say? Garbage in, garbage out. Businesses that try to consume raw data could be led down the wrong path, could make the wrong decisions. And then related to that, you have to be really careful about folks tampering with your data, just the way that you would be careful about folks tampering with your water sources. There are malicious actors out there. In fact, I actually live down the street from the Croton Reservoir, which is where all of New York City gets your water. And the security around the Croton Reservoir is insane. Why? Because after 9/11, we got really worried, and rightly so, about folks actually putting things in the water. I'm sure many of you feel similarly about the data in your ecosystem. And so when we say, hey, data is the water, or customer data is the water of your business, what is so complex about turning customer data from bronze to silver to gold? Why is it unique in terms of being a data domain? So customer data starts out bronze, sort of gave some examples, right? Transactional data, website data. How do you get bronze data to silver? You have to do things like semantic tagging, normalization, standardization, filtering bad values, standardizing the schema, applying a universal identifier. And in some data domains, some of that stuff wouldn't be so hard because the data domain is knowable, it's pretty static. Customers are a mess, right? I give myself as an example all the time. I used to be Margaret Feinberg, living in Brooklyn. I'm Margaret Gorin, living in Ossining. Doing that work of applying a universal identifier and matching those unlinked records is very different in the customer domain. But then once you have that silver level data, that's still not necessarily usable for marketing and business end users. And so you still have to take that silver data and merge it into a unified view, build attributes on the customer profile, like what is somebody's lifetime value, do things like householding, so that it can actually get activated downstream. And underneath all of that, you have to have all the always-on sort of customer data operations that ensures that there's transparency, you can see lineage, you can manage change management. So again, very complex, similar to sort of taking water from a mountaintop and having it flow through your pipes. And so from an architecture perspective, if you think about how to think about customer data in a lakehouse architecture, given that it's a unique data domain with unique challenges, what we recommend as a best practice for brands is that to avoid having a years-long implementation where you get mired in all of that complexity in the customer data domain, you accelerate your build by syncing your lakehouse with Amperity, using delta sharing, and taking those customer data operations into a specialized tool like Amperity. And so what we'll do is we'll use delta sharing to ingest the raw data. We'll then run it through Stitch. We'll generate silver level tables like merged customers and unified transactions and unified itemized transactions and unified loyalty events. We'll then aggregate and curate that into usable views for the business so that they can go out and do personalized marketing experiences. But then all of that is also available back in the lakehouse that you're building, again, using outbound delta sharing. So what do you achieve when you approach your architecture in this manner? 8 key things, and again, bringing it back to if you were building a house, probably similar to the types of goals you would have. Number 1, high quality, right? If you're gonna build a house, you wanna do it right. If you're gonna build a Lakehouse CDP, you wanna make sure that the data is accurate and that it's trusted. Number 2, owning versus renting. You don't build a house to then rent it. Why would you build a Lakehouse CDP and then rent your key data assets? You want to own those. Number 3, multi-purpose. I need my house to function as an office and as a playroom and as a place for entertaining at Thanksgiving. Lakehouse CDPs need to serve a lot of different use cases, right, across analytics, marketing, compliance, and so it needs to be flexible to shape the data for all of those use cases. Number 4, room to grow. I talked about how when we bought our house, there's no space for us to now put an extension on. So when we're building a Lakehouse CDP, we want to have from the outset the tools and the data operations to allow us to grow over time. Number 5, up to code. You need a certificate of occupancy to move into your house when you build it. Well, in the data world, we need to make sure that we're up to code with things like CCPA and GDPR. Number 6, safety and security. You don't want to be lying in bed at night scared that somebody's going to break into your house. I bet you definitely don't want to be lying in bed at night thinking about the data in your organization, worried about somebody breaking into that. Number 7, easy to maintain. I mean, apart from adding new destinations, channels, just the everyday operations of all of your data workflows, it goes back to the transparency and the ability to troubleshoot and see if something isn't working. And then number 8, limited commute. I'm ending on this one because a huge benefit of the Lakehouse CDP and the new features that we released today is limiting having to move the data and copy the data, right? Just like I don't want to have to travel hours and hours, it's expensive, it's cumbersome. We're now allowing brands to limit the commute of data and limit copy of data with the Lakehouse CDP. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Tom from Virgin Atlantic. I think they're really at the forefront of actually acting on some of these ideas and excited to learn more.
Cool.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Cool, so hi everyone. So just building on what Margaret was talking about around the conceptual side of this, I just wanted to talk everyone through how we've thought about it and how we are essentially implementing this at Virgin Atlantic. So quickly, a quick bit about me. I'm obviously based in the UK, as you can probably tell by the accent. I live in a nice little seaside town called Brighton, if anyone's been there. It's not the same Brighton Beach as the one just down the road. Work in Crawley near the Gatwick Airport, and no one needs to know my age. I've always been an aviation geek, so my work history has all been airlines, EasyJet, and avionics with BAE Systems. And I've had the pleasure to be at Virgin Atlantic for the last 8 years. And in my spare time, I'm training to be a pilot, which is always good for an airline. I can't fly professionally though because my eyesight is terrible. I'm also a DJ, which I've been doing for 18 years now, which is scary. But I've been lucky enough to do some of the events for Virgin Atlantic, like the Pride flight, and that's Brighton Pride up there. So yeah, let's just jump on a few opportunities, which at Lakehouse was a very different type of opportunity. So who in the room actually has heard about Virgin Atlantic? Because I feel it's, oh, okay, good. That's a good sign. The US marketing is working. Cool. So we actually only have 42 aircraft now, which normally surprises people because the brand is huge. We're partnered with Delta, Air France, KLM, and SkyTeam, and we started in 1984, so it's a big birthday this year. Very exciting. And we have about 8,500 employees. So, the size isn't that huge, but it's a very exciting place to be. So, like most organisations, our catalyst for changing and thinking this just is not working is that our customer data was all over the place. Our single customer view was, and we have multiple, the main one of those was based on deterministic matching, which really relied on customers entering their passport number, date of birth, and those kind of legal binding pieces that have to be absolutely accurate. And we only usually get those probably within 24 hours of a flight from check-in. So that was causing a problem because we can't then see all of our customers who have booked in the future. And our customers can book up to about 330 days in advance of a flight. So that's a massive big gap of things we can't do. And the only way we could do that is through probabilistic matching, which we could have done ourselves, but I was like, no, I do not have the time in the day to start thinking about that. And some of our friends that I spoke to tried it, and it was not a good, pretty story. And that just led to loads of lack of trust in data. It was just no one trusted our customer data. We couldn't say how many customers we had, and it was all a bit of a nightmare. So that's where I said that one of the great things we need to look at is a customer data platform. So I went out to the market and thought, right, customer data platforms, tell me about them. And normally I get a quote similar to this, which pretty much every single company does. And it's really frustrating because it's saying, you know, we can do absolutely everything and it's amazing and it'll be unified and it's great. And actually, you know, don't boot me off stage, but Amperity was a little bit guilty of that. But I was like, okay, great, well, prove it. So you like Nancy squirming in the corner. But Nancy probably said this to me, but I was like, no, we are going to get you to prove this, and that's what we went for. So we thought, actually, if you can prove that you can take this picture, which is quite common, where when I first joined, we had relational databases, we have all of the sources, just spaghetti junction into each other. We had a single customer view that someone introduced me to, thought, great, we got one. And then someone said, yeah, but there's another one over here. And then you think, oh, okay, good. So the challenge there was just like, let's just get this tidied up. So challenged Amperity in this case for a pilot to take our really, really messy data, which if anyone's seen a raw message from a booking system for a legacy airline, Ben is probably still scarred from it. It is an absolute nightmare. So challenged Amperity said, can you take that and turn that into something sensible? Which luckily they did within, I think it's 4 days, they managed to turn our data into a stitch profile, and then about 9 to get to a customer 360 using a sample data set and very raw data. So where we are now is a lot more to the place that Margaret's talking about. So we have started implementing the Data Lakehouse CDP, which I think we're quite pioneering with that. Virgin's always been quite pioneering with everything, so why not do it with CDPs? So we are really pushing to get all of our data really nicely structured in that medallion architecture. It's customer, but beyond customer, with engineering, flight, operations, everything, into a really nice, neat enterprise data platform in Databricks, which we use primarily for our reporting layer in Power BI. But with this new Delta sharing capability, it means that I don't have to panic my data protection officer and my info security team by saying I want to send all of our customer data over to a third party via SFTP or other means. I mean, some companies probably do it by email, but we just ignore that. And then we can say, right, we are going to keep all of our data, we're going to control it, and we can choose exactly what we're going to take across. And we don't have to worry about latency, we don't have to worry about anything like that, because we can just say exactly what we want from our Lakehouse, where we've structured it nicely, to Margaret's point, like don't get rotten wood and put it into your CDP. And then we can just take that back into the identity resolution from Amperity and say, actually, our nice curated list of all the transactional bookings a customer's made, let's just stamp that Amperity ID against it, and we don't have to worry about trying to keep all that kind of stuff in sync. And the challenge we've had with customer data, we have that with all our booking data, so getting that nicely structured, why would we try and do that in 2 places? So we found a real benefit in this, and we've started testing it, and we're getting really close to having this working, so that Amperity can then be used to activate through the channels where marketeers, like low, no-code people, can play around to their heart's content in Amperity, and I can be confident that that data is solid, the transactional data is all right, and it's validated to our financial systems, and then the more geekier side of our business in the data science team and all the kind of modeling can sit in the Data Lakehouse and in the tools that gives them in Databricks and use exactly the same data in the same way, but dive much further down. So it's really given us a much, like the ability to use this same controlled data across multiple different personas in the business, which is really great news. So as a result of where we are with the implementation so far, so we implemented just before the end of last year and finished a lot of this. We basically managed to do probably five use cases that we just would not have been possible using just deterministic matching. Or they were just very complicated. We would have had to do really point solutions or get a specific tool to do that piece. So it was a really, really good result, and we're seeing positive impact on our Net Promoter Score, on the things like ancillary revenue, and the satisfaction of our Flying Club members, because that's a really big focus area for us. So what's coming up? is we really want to just really refine this identity resolution, because now we've got a really solid way of processing this data and really having it under control and using a new technology, essentially, a new architectural pattern. We really want to refine that identity resolution. We want to make sure we're expanding to try and see how far we can push almost the customer identity across our data stack. So whether that's operations, engineering, there's loads of different use cases that come up every day about what we could potentially do, and just experiment with like partnering with Amperity with a lot of the new tools that are coming up. So we haven't really touched Profile API yet. We're really interested about the Amp AI and all the capabilities within that, and especially that new version of the Stitch that I saw this morning that was news to me as well. So very exciting. So it's a really quick run through because we didn't have that long. But hopefully that's just more than happy to talk to anybody after the session. But I think we've got probably 3-4 minutes for some questions, 5 minutes in fact, for some questions if anyone would like to ask me anything. And we do have a couple of little prizes for good questions. Margaret will judge if they're good or not. Yes. There we go. So yeah, we've got a couple of the little salt and pepper shakers to offer up if anyone would like to ask a question. Yeah. It's a little bribe. All Any right. questions?
Oh, we've got a hand over.
Right down the back. Yeah. I think there's a microphone coming over. And all the questions are going to put to Margaret. So.
Okay. I have one. It's kind of a two-parter. Yep. So for Tom, it sounds like you guys are ingesting gold layer data. Is that correct? Into Amperity right now?
So technically we'd be doing mostly, it's a mix of bronze and silver, depending on the, so Stitch mainly use bronze, and we use some of the silver to enhance that Stitch.
Okay. And then, so a two-part question for Margaret. So currently with our tenant, we aren't doing a ton of like PII cleanup. So we are mostly ingesting probably more silver layer data into Amperity. And I guess the question is, are we moving away from, or moving towards being able to do more of that ETL in Amperity on more of that silver layer, or bronze, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that's an architectural decision that brands make. We do offer that capability, right? So you could send us bronze level data, and for data to be able to go through Stitch, it goes through a process of cleansing and standardization and normalization. So things like if you have two different sources and in one of them the phone numbers have parentheses and the other doesn't. Yeah. All of that happens automatically. But it's also things like the semantic layer, right? Which is, and that's why we sort of call it ELT, right? Because the schemas will come in potentially different from each other, and we'll tag each of the fields so that we can have a common schema. But then it's also things like filtering out the bad values, right? So we call that block listing, where we'll see that there's maybe like for a retailer, the store address gets used a lot as somebody's address when it shouldn't. Okay. And so, but the architectural decision is, I think some brands say like, hey, we're having to do this anyway. Sometimes, oftentimes they're doing it in the data warehouse or the data lake, and so if we're doing it anyway. And we're sending it to you, maybe we'll continue doing that. I think as we move towards the Lakehouse CDP, and these things are going to be much more tightly intertwined, it may make more sense for brands that weren't necessarily doing that with Amperity to now, again, take that customer data operations burden, free up more of the time for your data engineers so they can do more of the fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cool. Maybe got time for one more, probably. Come on, someone wants Wilbur and Orville. They're cute.
So, and did we send the salt and pepper shaker?
No, we didn't, but we can try and send those over.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey there. Thank you for kind of talking through how you chose Amperity, but can you maybe highlight how you chose Databricks as your lakehouse and why you made the decision to choose them versus some of the other providers in the market?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're quite openly quite a big Microsoft shop, I suppose you can call it, and Databricks has got a really good they're really great on Azure. So we actually probably were more influenced by Databricks from our data science team, who were very much in Databricks notebooks, and at that time we started seeing that there was a lot of capabilities and patterns around the medallion architecture and Data Lakehouse, and quite simply we just done some testing and worked out that most of the team could already had experience in Databricks, so why would we not start trying to build patterns in that? And the partners we work with are very Databricks heavy, so it was a case of if it ain't broke, don't try and go somewhere else. And it's working really well for us. So, and the development speed in Databricks is just crazy. The amount of new features that are coming out every day, it's quite powerful.
All right, thank you.